Hey there, everyone. Welcome back to Utility Sports. Really excited for this video where we're going to focus on the Charlotte Hornets with the continuation of my offseason preview series on the channel where we break down every single team's offseason, potential things that they could look to do, ways that they can look to get better. Some teams may be wanting to get worse. And we'll talk about where Charlotte specifically is at in this one. The Hornets have been heavily requested on the channel, so I do appreciate everyone's comments. You'll see those flashing on the screen. And also, if you want to see some other team, leave that down in the comment section below. Like I said, I read on all those comments. I see what everyone says on the channel, and it's always good to know who wants to see what team next, and kind of gives me a direction on what team I should cover in the next couple of days. If you guys are new to Utility Sports, make sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell, especially if you enjoyed the video and the content that you see in here. A lot of work does go into these on top of all the other stuff I'm doing in my life. So I do hope you guys enjoy the content that I take time out of my day to record and bring to you. So if you do, make sure to smash that like button again, like I said. And just let me know in the comment section. I always like reading those. So video preview, let's get into it. Season recap. We're going to look at where the Hornets just were, what we learned about this team, and kind of where they should go from where they currently are at. Then we'll look at 2023, the NBA draft lottery odds, and how it's going to impact this team potentially. We'll talk about the top 4 prospects in this draft, who I think they are, and how I think they could potentially fit with Charlotte. And then we'll look at other NBA draft prospects, first round, second round guys that could make some sense as targets for the Hornets. We'll also consider their NBA free agency situation. And we'll look at targets that could make some sense for them as well on top of that. And then we'll get into a way too early outlook where we really have to address some things about what Charlotte could potentially look to add, and based on what they add, how they could potentially improve and get to where they want to go within the next couple of years, even though it is, I think, in my perspective as of right now, at least a little bit of a shady way to get there. We'll see if they find a way to get to that spot. So let's get into the actual season recap here now. And I think starting with the record is the best place to look. 27-55, clearly a disappointing year. After firing James Borrego as their head coach this past offseason, they go into another year with Steve Clifford coming back to the franchise, and it just did not go well. 14th in the Eastern Conference, which is second to last in the East. They also had the 4th worst record in the NBA in totality. So they were not good this season. I think that there's a lot of reasons as to why they weren't very good. One, there's not a lot of positional depth on this team. I think that they're very young. They're very reliant on youth as well. There's a lot of teams around the league that have similar number of young guys as Charlotte, but I think the Hornets are kind of deprived of some veterans that could really step in and be good players for them, specifically impact players when it comes to winning. And I just don't think Steve Clifford's a good coach, to be completely honest with you. I think at some point he's going to be replaced with the guy that they actually want. Of course, Kenny Atkinson was their first choice last offseason, and then he ended up not coming over to Charlotte. So I do think that there's a good argument to be had that Charlotte's not going to be a team that's going to make a push within the next year or so, just based on the facts of who their head coach is and kind of the circumstances around the team. But there is a lot still to break down. LaMelo Ball only played in, I believe, 36 games this past year. But when he was on the court, he still flashes one of the NBA's bright young players who's going to grow into a build-around type piece. Now, is he a 1A player on a championship team? Probably not. There's only like 5 to 7 of those guys in the entire league. So that's not really a knock on him. And to be honest, it's a really kind of moronic way of looking at basketball. Like, yes, everyone wants to have that 1A guy, but you need to have 15 players, and LaMelo Ball is one of those guys that in this league is a really, really good player to have. His playmaking ability obviously speaks volumes when you watch him on tape. He's a fantastic passer who throws some incredible passes you just can't even imagine that he somehow saw on the court. That's kind of a ball trait. Both him and Lonzo do have that type of feel. LaMelo, I think, is a little bit more of a downhill passer and more of a, hey, I can create off the dribble myself and get to a spot, whereas Lonzo's more of a connecting type passer where, he's going to throw more touch passes naturally than LaMelo does. But it's good to see LaMelo with the year that he had. I hope he comes back this year healthy. Obviously a tough end to his season with the ankle injury that he had. And then Terry Rozier averaged over 20 points a game as well. This year there was, I believe, 57 players in totality that averaged 20 plus points a game, so it's not like it's as illustrious of a group as it used to be, with the way that scoring is at this point. With some of the rule changes, specifically transition take foul, there's more transition baskets. There's just gonna be naturally more scoring with some of the rule changes. It doesn't take away from the greats who are scoring a lot, but it does mean that some of these guys who would have been probably 16, 17, 18 point per game scorers, they're going to creep into the 20s. And that's what Rozier did. That's what Kelly Oubre did as well. Rozier, I do think impacts winning. I think Rozier is a solid guard who could help a lot of teams. I was kind of surprised to see Charlotte not trade him this past season. I thought he was going to be one of the top names at the trade deadline to become available. Obviously, there wasn't a lot of reports on that, but I thought that potentially he could be opened up in a deal and acquired by a team that's looking to make a push. I think he would have helped a lot of teams. Unfortunately, though, no team made a push for him, so he spent his year in Charlotte. And then Kelly Oubre, I know you look at him in terms of what he presents on paper as a guy who averages 20 points a game this year. He's a wing, which is a really valuable position. He's got pretty solid length. He can block some shots. He does a lot of different things, and you think, oh, this guy's going to be a really, really good player. I just don't really think he's a winning player as much as his numbers would indicate. And I hate saying that about a guy. I don't want to be, the bearer of bad news. And I don't think it's completely true across the entire NBA for every player. So, I think a great example of that is Bobby Portis. Early in his career, people questioned about if Bobby Portis could be a high impact player on a good team. And a lot of people were skeptical. And then he finds kind of the right fit, the right role in Milwaukee, and he thrives in that role, and he's been hugely impactful to why Milwaukee's found as much success over the last 3-4 years or so as they have, because he's been awesome for them. So I don't want to limit Kelly Oubre, but I just don't think if he's your second, third, fourth best player, you're going to be a very good team. I just don't really believe that. I think that if he was a bench player that you could limit his minutes, play him in certain circumstances that you think he can be helpful, he could probably have a higher impact. Yes, his statistical output will be much lower, but his team would probably win more and be more successful in the minutes that he's actually on the court, which really should be the most important thing when you're talking about players, impact, lineups, everything like that. It's really about, hey, how much does this help the team? How much better is the team on the court with you versus when you're off the court? And I don't think Kelly Oubre is one of those guys that has helped winning as much. PJ Washington really flashed down the stretch of the year, though. I want to shout him out. He's heading into free agency. We'll talk about that a little bit more later on for Charlotte. And I think PJ is a player that we've always been kind of waiting on that potential. He's a good shot maker. Kind of everything we're going to say about Jarris Walker a little bit later in this video. PJ Washington has flashed that to a certain extent. Now, defensively, I think he's a little bit more limited. There's a reason he's not going to be one of those highly coveted forwards out in free agency, but I do think he is still going to have some league interest. And I think he's a good young player who's going to be someone that Charlotte would prefer keeping, and I think that they'll probably try and find a way to do it. Down the stretch of the year, I mean, he played very well against Dallas in back-to-back games that essentially ended the Mavericks season. And then you also look at the fact that he had, I believe, a 30-plus point performance the game right after that back-to-back as well against Dallas. I don't remember exactly what team that was, but he dominated in that game too. And down the stretch of the year, that's kind of how things started to go for him as a higher focal point in the offense. Again, they weren't winning a ton, but if he finds that right niche, that right role for him, I think he can be a good impact player. Mark Williams, I was kind of surprised he was not playing that much to begin the season. I thought that was going to be one of those obvious, like, hey, he steps in day one and he's the starting center. They went with Plumlee, of course, ended up panning out for them because they traded Plumlee, got a little bit of value out of him on the trade market. But Mark Williams is quite frankly the center of the future of this team. He's big, lengthy, he got good shot blocking feel, good timing, and I think as a rim runner, he's one of the better pairings you could find from last year's draft class with LaMelo Ball. Now, I would have preferred Jalen Duren for them. I said that on draft night. I just preferred Jalen Duren as a prospect, but I thought Mark Williams was still a very good prospect as well, and I think he's going to have a nice career in this league, so I don't want to be slandering Mark Williams here. I'm not trying to suggest that. I do think that there was other ways they could have gone on draft night, but Mark Williams is a guy that I felt very, very good about, and I felt like he was going to be a very safe, solid pick for them, and so far I think he's lived up to that a little bit. Dennis Smith Jr., as a Mavericks fan myself, I do have to shout out DSJ here, just because it was very, very sweet for him at the end of the year to get to shut up my Mavericks the way that he did, and I'm very happy for him on that, honestly, even though it did kind of bewilder my team and kind of end our season prematurely, with Dallas ultimately playing out of the play or falling out of the play-in because of Dennis Smith Jr.'s performances. But he basically gamed Dallas twice down the stretch, and he had a nice year. He really resurrected his career, probably extended his career maybe 4, 5, 6 years with the way that he played this season. Again, not a player who's going to be a starting level guard in this league. I think we saw that, but he probably sticks around now, and I'm very happy for him. The Mavericks really did him wrong pretty much since the moment Luka arrived in Dallas. They basically cast DSJ off to the side after averaging like 16 points a game as a rookie on having some awesome highlight moments for them. So I'm happy for him. He got his get back, and he's, I think, in a much better spot in his career after some early rumblings about him potentially trying out the NFL. I think it's safe to say he's going to be in the NBA at least for a little while longer. Then Gordon Hayward, I know everyone loves to hate on the contract and all this and all that, and he's always injured and missing time, but Gordon Hayward's still a solid basketball player. And at some point, expiring year of his contract, whenever that comes around, they might be able to flip him for a little bit of asset stuff. And they might have to take in a bad contract to do that. But Gordon Hayward's not really the problem here in Charlotte. I think that there's a collection of reasons this team's not that good. Part of it is, again, look at how many young players are on the roster. Like LaMelo Ball, Mark Williams, PJ Washington are three of your best players. You're just not going to be that good. First of all, I don't think the talent is up to par with some of the other teams in the league. Secondly, defensively, they're very, very limited, and having a rookie center doesn't really help a lot. And then your point guard, LaMelo Ball, not being a good point of attack defender at all either hurts. And I think, people like to look at the roster and just kind of say, yuck. I think that they have a lot of good pieces. They just need to find ways to shift some stuff around. They need to add in some more top-end talent for sure. This roster is nowhere near complete, but they have starting points that I feel like I can trust. I think LaMelo Ball is going to be a very, very good guard in this league for a while. Mark Williams, I think, is going to develop into a nice center. PJ Washington, I think, could be a good four-man. So out of that, you have other ways. Like Rozier, I think, is a perfect combo guard or like bench guard, to be honest, is really the role I think he would find the most success in. Kind of what we saw Brogdon do this year, taking a step back for Boston, but it's a better team situation and a better individual situation where he also gets some hardware. I think Rozier could probably fill a role like that for some other team, or Charlotte if they figure some way else how to add some talent around LaMelo. But I just, I kind of went off on a tangent there, but I just don't think Gordon Hayward's a huge problem. Now, I know he hasn't lived up to the contract, and yes, they overpaid him to get him, all this and all that, but I don't think that they're as poorly off as a lot of other people think. And obviously a big loss this year was Miles Bridges. But I do want to address this, and this is not going to be me virtue signaling. I think that this should just be obvious common sense for everybody, which is why I don't think this is virtue signaling. This guy should not play in the NBA ever again, quite frankly. And Adam Silver is a disgrace to the league and should honestly step down as commissioner of the NBA. One, because he continues to run this league like it's all about money and that's all he cares about. You think about all the money cash grabs he's done. He's thrown away pretty much everything that has been the NBA. And some of the changes, sure, maybe have worked out well in terms of entertainment for the casual fan, whatever. But the fact that Miles Bridges basically didn't get any punishment from the NBA other than a slap on the wrist is ridiculous to me. Completely ridiculous. You think about the fact that he essentially landed a 10-game suspension. I know they labeled it a 30-game suspension, but they said, 20 games have already been served. How? He wasn't on a roster. No team signed him. Those 20 games aren't served. And even 30 games would have been way too little of a suspension. I know people are going to say, he didn't play all this past year. Yeah, there's a reason why. Teams didn't want him. They were worried about all the legal stuff. And he pled no contest to it, which by NBA rule, with the way that the CBA is drafted, the NBA had the ability to suspend him indefinitely if they wanted to, or ban him if they really wanted to. They had the power to do that. Adam Silver chose not to, and I just want to point this out. Draymond Green got suspended, first of all, ejected and suspended then for the next game in a playoff setting for stepping on a player. And granted, you could argue that that was warranted. I'm not going to disagree with you or debate you on that. But Miles Bridges literally beat up a woman, beat her up. This is not just one time stepping on her. Beat her up, bruised, full body, in front of his kids, by the way. And guess what? 10 games. 10 regular season games. How many regular season games is a playoff game worth? Could you argue Draymond Green's suspension for stepping on Sabonis was more severe than Miles Bridges for beating up his wife at the time? Yeah, I think so. I think you could really argue that, and I think it's a disgrace to the league. I hope the Hornets do not sign this man. Again, this is not virtue signaling. I just think this should be common sense. There's no room for this in our society. There's no room for this in the NBA. And quite frankly, if he does get signed, it's another example back to the NFL. When Ray Rice did what he did, the reason he didn't get signed was because he was 29 going on 30, basically. Kareem Hunt kicked a woman and no one cared because he was 24. It's just the reality. It's a sad reality. People care more about money and trying to build a good team than they do about morals and ethics and the things that actually should matter. So I hope that this guy does not play in the NBA again. I'm going to be very clear, very blunt about that. And I'm sure Hornets fans would love to have him because he's a great talent. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying anything bad about Miles Bridges as a basketball player. He's fantastic. And he was a really good fit with LaMelo and part of the reason why this team took a huge step back this year. But do you care more about winning 10, 15 more regular season games? Or do you care about the message you send to your fans on what's acceptable and what's not? Because to me, that message is more important, honestly. So let's get into the NBA draft lottery odds here, where we're going to see the Charlotte Hornets right in the middle of things, right in the thick of things. Fourth best odds, at landing Victor Wembanyama, which is a 12.5% chance. So pretty likely that we could actually see them land Victor Wembanyama, who is a franchise-changing player. But you also see the odds, 11.5% or better to be picking 2, 3, or 4, and a 25% chance to fall all the way down to 6, with a 7% chance to be picking 5th overall. So you look at these odds and you say, okay, let's say Charlotte lands at 1. Victor Wembanyama is a clear pick. It doesn't matter who's on your roster. And to be honest, he fits in quite well alongside Mark Williams. He fits in quite well around LaMelo Ball. Now, I think that LaMelo would really, really be benefited by having not one, but 2 shot blockers behind him in Williams and Wembanyama. And I think the fact that their backline defense would become significantly better because of this would probably go the longest way in helping this team become more and more competitive, which is what they really need, is more defense. But also Wembanyama's offensive skill set would really carry this team as kind of the primary prolific scorer. I think he's going to average 23 to 25 points a game his rookie year. I think he's going to do it on somewhat decent efficiency, not as efficient as a lot of people are projecting. I know I've seen some people project 55 to 60%. He's not going to be that efficient as a rookie. But I think he's going to have flashes and maybe stretches where for a week he's like, oh my gosh, this guy just is so good and so skilled that he's going to put the ball in the hoop a ton. I just think he's going to blow people away. Still, I think people are underrating him sometimes, honestly, which is kind of funny. Because, a lot of people, it seems there's so much hype around him that it seems like, how are people underrating him? I just don't know if people understand the scale and how much this guy impacts franchise value and the direction of an organization, because he's going to really revitalize and revamp any team he goes to. Second overall, we talk about Scoot Henderson. That's a much less clear fit in my eyes if Charlotte were to draft him second overall, because he's another on-ball guard who defensively I think is going to have to grow quite a bit on that end of the floor. He is only 6'2", so he's semi-limited, and if LaMelo Ball is never going to commit to becoming a good defender, which I don't think he's going to, Charlotte would be kind of in a spot where it's going to be tough to win with that backcourt, even if they're really, really good offensively, which I think they would become that over time. There would still be some natural limitations. They'd have to find a lot of good forward play and back, or other front court play as well at the center spot defensively, even behind Mark Williams long term. But I do think based on the talent, you still look at that. Amen Thompson, I think, would be a really, really fun player to watch in Charlotte because, he's also a 6'7" guard like LaMelo, but they're very, very polar opposites in terms of play style. LaMelo likes to settle for jump shots, and yes, he gets to the rim a bit. And I mean, LaMelo is a very good passer, just like Amen Thompson. But Amen Thompson's got a more electric handle. He's way quicker, way more athletic, way more vertically explosive. He's a very fun player to watch in this year's draft. So I recommend, if you haven't watched Amen Thompson, to do so. I'm going to have a scouting profile on the channel on him very, very soon, which I'm very excited to record that one, by the way. And then Brandon Miller, I think, is probably the most seamless fit outside of Victor Wembanyama when we're talking about the top 4 prospects, because he just steps in as a wing and he shoots the ball and he spaces the court. He can handle it a bit, so he still has some of that upside that you're looking for in a top 4 selection. And he's a growing playmaker. I think it was a little overhyped this year by a lot of other people, but I still think he would significantly help Charlotte on the wing. And anytime you can add good wing talent in this league, you need to find ways to do it, because wing is probably the least deep position in the NBA. And the center is very, very thin as well, honestly. But just skilled size is a big issue in the league, and there's a big disparity on the teams that have it and the teams that don't. I think Charlotte's the team that really, really needs more skilled size, which leads us into some of their other draft picks. And we're going to talk about what that situation looks like, because they do have their own selection, like I talked about, lottery dependent. They could finish in the top 4. We talked about some of those players from the top 4, how they would fit. But then also pick 27. So we'll look at, both of their first round picks, guys that they could pick, at pick 5 or later, if they did fall down in the draft, or also at pick 27, who they could look to add. That pick originally comes from the Denver Nuggets. And they have 3 second-round selections, so I expect this team to be semi-busy on draft night. Now, I don't think that they're going to be buying and moving up as much as, I'm sure fans would love to see, but, probably selling a second-round pick for cash. We could probably see something like that happen on draft night, which, again, not the most exciting, doesn't really move the needle a ton. Now, do they have the pathway to trading, say, 27, 34, and 39 to move up to, like, 18, 19? Possibly, right? But that's a very niche situation where Charlotte would have to really want somebody they want to move up for, and then the team picking at that spot would have to say, look, we don't really have a guy here, let's move down, try and pick up a couple extra assets, and that's just kind of cloudy typically on draft night. So we'll see exactly what happens, but I think that they have pathways to do whichever direction that they really want to go in. So looking at some of those prospects that could fit in outside of the top 4, I want to start with Anthony Black at guard. He's 6'7". I know some people are going to say, so you think Amen Thompson, Scoot Henderson, kind of a clunkier fit? How is Anthony Black a fit? And it's because of his play style and the things he looks to do. He's much more of a connector piece as a guard. Yes, he's 6'7" like LaMelo, but he's way, way better defensively. Very, very smart and intuitive with the way that he's able to use his feet and his hands on that end of the floor. He's got very active hands. He consistently pokes the ball loose. He's a smart doubler as well, which I do think would help this team's interior defense a bit and cutting off some driving lanes, which LaMelo's kind of prone to giving some of those up oftentimes. I think Anthony Black could definitely, with his length at the position, step in and help quite a bit more than a guy like Terry Rozier currently does. Forward Jarris Walker and forward Taylor Hendricks, 2 of my favorite guys in this draft to talk about, kind of in this 5 to 6 to 7 range. 2 players who I think are going to really step in and help an NBA team. Skilled size. They can both dribble. They can both make shots off the move. Hendricks, I think, is a better spot-up three-point shooter currently than Walker. I think also Hendricks is a better three-point or a better rim defender than Walker as well. But Walker may be a little bit more mobile, a little bit quicker on his feet defensively. Both of them are going to be very good NBA players. The allure on them, some people are really going to buy the stock and say, oh my gosh, these guys could be top 2, top 3 players in the draft. I just don't see that high-end upside, but they're very, very safe picks in my opinion, where I think, hey, look, this is probably going to be a 10-year NBA starter. And that's a really, really good thing to find outside the top 4 in the NBA draft. If you are really confident in that, that's like a home run. And Anthony Black, Jarris Walker, Taylor Hendricks, to me, are all guarantees in that, in my opinion. Ausar Thompson, twin brother of Amen Thompson, again, plays an overtime elite. Very athletic. Would fill in the Miles Bridges spot perfectly, in my opinion, if they decide to not bring back Bridges. So Ausar, I think, would be a really, really good addition. Would really help this team a lot in terms of the athleticism. I think the upside is there as well for him. I think he's got a higher ceiling potentially than Black, Walker, and Hendricks, but his floor is also significantly lower. The perimeter shot's a little inconsistent. He's flash as a passer. I just don't think that the continuity and the film is all there for him to, for you to feel confident that, hey, this guy's going to step in and instantly be good at this. I think that there's a little bit of a runway that he needs to have before becoming a high impact player at the NBA level, but that's okay. He's a rookie. He's still relatively young at 20 years old. So I don't have concerns about him. I just think he's not going to step in and impact this team as quickly as a guy like Walker or Hendricks, but that's okay because I don't think Charlotte's in a spot where they're going to be pushing to, be the 1 seed next year or anything crazy like that. Pick 27, guys like Maxwell Lewis, Leonard Miller, Bilal Coulibaly from Mets 92, teammates with Victor Wembanyama. I think those three guys would all be good examples. Lewis, more of a movement shooter. He's got a pretty good stroke. Leonard Miller, rebounding wing. Really a change in play style for him from where he was in high school to what he's doing this year for G League Ignite. And it's been a good change. I think something that needed to happen. And just gives them more length and size, which is what this team, I think, needs more of. Coulibaly's kind of more of an upside pick, where at 6'6", I could see him growing into kind of this guard that can handle a bit and play off the ball as a cutter. He's smart, intuitive. He's got the length to defend multiple positions. It's just, he's not going to be there year one. He's going to spend most of his rookie year with the Greensboro Swarm. And Hornets fans might be groaning a little bit because they say, we draft one of those guys every year, it seems like. And you do, but there's nothing wrong with that. It's just long-term approach is not bad, especially at pick 27. If you can get a guy that 2-3 years down the road becomes somewhat of an impact player, you're in a pretty decent spot with that selection. Second rounders that I really, really like for this team. There's also some guys on here that I would have considered myself at pick 27 if I was in Mitch Kupchak's shoes. And Jordan Walsh is a guy I really, really like. Defensively, I think he's smart. I think he's got the length to defend multiple positions. I think he's very, very good at getting down in a stance and staying in a stance, trying to cut off guys. I think Eric Musselman does a very good job coaching perimeter defense at the collegiate level. That translates pretty well to the NBA level. Ricky Council IV, another Arkansas guy. Not that I love him for Charlotte here, but I think with the amount of picks that they have between 30 and 45, that's kind of the range for Ricky Council. And I think realistically, if you have 3 selections in that range, it's fairly likely that Charlotte could come out with him in this draft. Dylan Mitchell, a player I would love to see play with LaMelo Ball. It would be showtime, honestly, watching those two guys. Now, they might lose by 15, but Dylan Mitchell, I think, is still somebody who's going to fit into a really good role in the NBA where he's going to work off the baseline, which is somewhat rare to see. There's not a lot of forwards who do that, play that way. I think the best example of that is Jared Vanderbilt, who is progressing to being a corner sitter as well, shooting a little bit more from three-point land than he did in Minnesota. Obviously did that for the Lakers quite a bit and Utah in his time there briefly with the Jazz. And I think Dylan Mitchell could become a better Jared Vanderbilt. Now that there's a pathway for him to getting there, and there's a pathway where he doesn't get there. If he doesn't get there, he's maybe just a high energy guy like a Derrick Jones Jr. But if he gets to Vanderbilt's level, especially with his defensive impact, his offensive rebounding, which I think he's going to be very, very good at, I think Dylan Mitchell is one of the sneakier players in this draft that could have a really nice impact for a team. And to be honest, I would probably draft him in the first round if I had a selection and some of my other guys weren't there. Amani Bates, another example of a player I would consider in the back end of round 1 if I'm looking for a specific skill set, which is movement, shooting, and range. He's a very, very good three-point shooter. He had the highest unassisted three-point percentage this year in terms of creating off the dribble. He made more shots off the dribble from 3 than pretty much any other player in college. Very, very good three-point shooter. I think if you put him in a lesser role, you could still find success in terms of winning games. It's just about him maturing into that role and accepting that role. Trayce Jackson-Davis, I think, would be a perfect backup center for Charlotte. I think, in fact, you put him and Mark Williams together, and there's your front court of the future probably for a while when it comes to the center position, starter, backup. And if Mark Williams misses games, Trayce Jackson-Davis steps in. And, oh, by the way, he's just as good at shot blocking, and he's a phenomenal passer, something I think he's better at than Mark Williams. Gives you a kind of secondary play style. If LaMelo Ball gets blitzed, you drop it off. Trayce Jackson-Davis can be a little bit of a decision maker in the middle of the floor. I like it a lot for Charlotte. I like Trayce Jackson-Davis for pretty much any team that drafts him because he's smart, he's fluid athletically, and he can jump and he can block shots. And those are all the things that if you're looking for a center, regardless if they're 6'9" or 7'1" or 7'4", if they're skilled and they know how to play basketball, they're going to be good. And Trayce Jackson-Davis to me is one of those guys. Terquavion Smith, of course, Charlotte fans probably have a good look at him playing at NC State. I think that he would be a nice addition to this team in terms of a bench scoring role. He'd have to kind of fill in the role that we saw Terry Rozier play early in his career with the Boston Celtics. I think that's the role Terquavion Smith could really have a lot of success in. Now, I think defensively, he's not going to find the same level of success that Rozier did, but in terms of coming off the bench, impacting the game on the offensive end, I think Terquavion Smith, who didn't shoot the ball as efficiently this year as I think a lot of scouts and executives would have hoped to see from him, especially when they check Basketball Reference and say, whoa, this guy only shot 38% from the field, basically. There might be some concerns there, which is why I had him slip into the second round. But for the guys like Dylan Mitchell, Amani Bates, Ricky Council IV, Trace Jackson Davis, Quavion Smith, I think that all of them could end up becoming first-round picks. I don't quite see that for Jordan Walsh, but I wouldn't completely rule it out either. Then we look at their free agency situation, and I think Charlotte's free agency situation is more so about what's in-house instead of what's out on the market. And I know that's not the sexiest thing, that's not the most exciting thing, and Hornets fans might say, oh, really? We're not really going to add a lot of exterior players? And it's not, again, it's not super fun. But $31.4 million in cap space, I think some of that's going to go to PJ Washington, who they're going to give the qualifying offer to. And then he's going to head toward restricted free agency. And with the new CBA rules, they might owe him a 10% bonus on top of whatever he would sign with another team. So, for example, if he signs a 4-year, $80 million deal with another team, they technically, matching it, would give him 4 years, $88 million. Very, niche change in the CBA that benefits these restricted free agents a little bit more, better than their current situation has been. In years prior, look at what happened with Ayton going to Indiana to get an offer, and then Phoenix just saying, oh yeah, we'll just match it. And then, he's in a situation that he doesn't really want to be in, and it's just not really a good look for the NBA. This restricted free agency change is good for the league, but the Hornets probably aren't happy about it now because they're going to have to pay PJ Washington a little bit more money if something like that were to happen. But still, I think that's where their priority number one is keeping Washington. Kelly Oubre has a cap hold. Miles Bridges has a cap hold. If Oubre goes, I don't even care. I don't think that he's going to be a high impact player for Charlotte for the next 3-4 years or anything like that. So, to be honest, I'm not really concerned about if Oubre stays or goes. Miles Bridges, though, I do think that ultimately, even though with what I said earlier, I think that the Hornets probably do bring him back in, keep him on the team, and with that, it's going to take some money, so they're going to pay him. I'm very interested to see what that contract ends up looking like. If he's kind of on a 1-year deal, what that looks like, or if they ink him to something long term, that's a very interesting decision. On top of that actual cap space, they do have their non-taxpayer mid-level exception, which, since it's an exception, they could go over the cap number to sign a player to that at $12.21 million annually. So they have a lot of flexibility there. Could add in like a Jay Crowder type or, a Joe Ingles type. Those are two of my favorite examples during these offseason previews. The only issue, though, for me is if I'm Charlotte, like, who am I attracting to come play here? And I don't think that there's as many options for them unless they were to get Victor Wembanyama. If they have the number 1 pick and they draft him, then things change and maybe their situation opens up a little bit to bring in a guy like that. But maybe a Christian Wood could make some sense filling that number. A 3-year, $36 million deal, maybe 2-year. The 3 years, maybe the third year is kind of non-guaranteed or something like that. On the biannual exception, $4.448 million, so nearly 4.5. And with that, you can bring in a player who's somebody you want to give a little bit more than the vets minimum to. I would just be kind of surprised if Charlotte really uses that this offseason. I was kind of surprised when they traded Jalen McDaniels away. Not that Jalen McDaniels is a perfect player or anything like that, but I just thought that's not really the answer for this team to get better long term. So I think that free agency is an interesting pathway right now for Charlotte. I don't really see them improving their team from the outside a lot, just given where they're currently at, and I just don't think they're going to be that attractive of a destination, honestly, for free agents out there. But, there is going to be some guys who are kind of in that middle range of players. Then maybe if Charlotte does open up money and goes out and pays somebody, they could find a way to do it. If you have an idea of who they would look to sign, let me know down in the comment section. I just didn't find any ideas that I really loved and I was like thrilled by for either Charlotte or for the players trying to sign there. Christian Wood's really the only guy that I was like, that kind of makes some sense. But again, I don't really love it. I think Christian Wood got underutilized, by the way, in Dallas. But it's just Christian Wood doesn't solve this team's issues, and honestly feels somewhat repetitive with Washington anyway. So the way too early outlook, and you can see here I chose a Jordan midsole shoe, and I think the way too early outlook is at best Charlotte's probably a mid team. I just don't really see this team taking a big step forward. Again, I think hiring Clifford as their head coach was a mistake. I don't think that there's any creativity on this team. I just don't think that they're going to be that good. And I don't want to be pessimistic about them. I do think that they have some nice bright spots. And if they get the first overall pick, I'm just flat out wrong with what I'm saying right now. But this is the issue with me recording this before the lottery. If I knew what the lottery results were, I would say, oh, well, if Charlotte's picking 1, then they're going to be great, right? But my assumption, just based on how the odds are, 12.5% chance, that means 87.5% of the time, Hornets fans are a little bit disappointed on draft night. And 87.5% of the time, that means to me that they're not going to be that great of a team next year, and that they have some work to do to really improve this team long term to getting to a spot where they feel really, really good about themselves. So, I think that they've done an okay job drafting. Bouknight not panning out hurts, obviously. I thought Bouknight was going to have a better start to his career than he has. And unfortunately for Charlotte, it's a guy that they probably would have really loved to get some more input from and more output from, specifically when it comes to building success. So I think Charlotte's in a weird spot. Hopefully you guys understood my pun a little bit with the Jordan midsoles. But I don't want to be critical on this team. I don't want to be too pessimistic, but given the circumstances with the whole Bridges situation, that I just don't really love it for them. I think that there's a lot of flaws inherently on this team. And I think that with how young they are, they're still a couple of years away from really starting to make pushes for postseason bursts and, top 6 seeding in the East or anything like that. So we'll see. I mean, it's going to be a crazy offseason in my eyes. I think there's a lot of movement. Maybe there's something I don't foresee, some big trade, some crazy event that comes out of nowhere that completely blows this up and changes what I'm seeing. But as of right now, I think Charlotte, quieter offseason. We will be talking trades at some point too on the channel about what could happen. I don't think Charlotte's going to be too involved in any of that, but it definitely will shake up the league, maybe open up some avenues for Charlotte to make some noise somehow, some way. So hopefully you guys did enjoy this video. If you're a Hornets fan, thank you for taking time and watching. I know a lot of my regular viewers do as well, so I really do appreciate each and every one of you for stopping in, watching this video. Like I said, there's going to be a lot more content coming out on the channel as well, so stick around for everything that'll be posting here. NBA mock drafts come out every single Monday. We're going to have a lot of fun ideas coming out on the channel too that I'm been racking up in my brain, and I've been holding secret a little bit, but I'm very excited. This is a little bit of a teaser for some of you who are still watching this video at this point. So very, very excited for the future of utility sports. Very excited for some of the content that's going to be coming out in the next couple of weeks. So stay tuned to that. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. If you did, leave a like, and we'll catch you in the very next utility sports video.